The text for today's message is Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 to 30. We'll just be reading verses 1 to 15. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of the gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." Therefore, as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty had issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold, and that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your God nor worship the image of gold you have set up." Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my God or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?" The sermon topic for today is the strangeness of God's provision and guidance. Parang mali ah. Here, the other, it's written here is principles to help us be peoples of integrity. Let's leave the rest of the time to Reverend Billy Arcayan.
I know, I'm not Pastor Nicky, but he's a total package, okay? Galing-galing niya. But I'm taller. Okay? I'm a bit taller, okay? I'm sure Pastor Nicky wanted so much to come and preach to us, okay? Kaya lang he's been coughing, okay, for 3 weeks now, so he asked to be excused, okay? So let's pray for him, okay? My wife and my daughter keep telling me last night, nagger, okay? Kasi yung Daniel, first 18 pages, then 25 pages, ngayon 27 pages, okay? Nakalimutan ko may communion, okay? So I'll talk fast, okay? Good morning, okay? Let me begin my message with a quotation from David Jeremiah. He wrote a book entitled The Handwriting on the Wall. Sabi niya, "The world is crying out for men and women, boys and girls, who have conviction of heart and who does not change their conviction on the basis of their circumstances." Do you agree with those words? Okay. His book was written 27 years ago, but it could just as easily apply to last year or last month or last week. Kasi katunayan, the world is really crying out for men and women, boys and girls who have conviction of heart and who does not change their conviction on the basis of their circumstances. The world needs people of conviction when it comes to financial integrity. The world needs people of conviction who will stand for God and say, I will not lie, I will not cheat, I will not give or receive bribes, regardless of the personal advantage it may bring. The world needs people of conviction when it comes to sexual integrity. The world needs people of conviction who will stand up and say, I will only use my body, my beauty in a way that pleases my God, because I recognize that my body belongs to Him. The world needs people of conviction even when it comes to religious integrity. Yan, better. The sound is better. We need people who will say, we will operate the church according to the Word of God, and when His Word is violated, responsibility will be taken and consequences will be accepted. Beloved, the quotation is true. The world is crying out for men and women, even boys and girls, who have conviction of heart and who will not change their convictions on the basis of their circumstances. So, again, it begs the question, are you a person of integrity? I trust that I'm speaking to a group of people this morning who would say, I certainly would want to be a man of conviction. Let me invite you, open your Bible to Daniel chapter 3. For those who are not here last week, okay, for those who are new to this book, and you are not here with us last week, okay, listen to this. Daniel was a Jewish teenager who was deported to the country of Babylon along with some other choice young people or young teenager by King Nebuchadnezzar around 605 BC. I said last week that they were separated intentionally, purposefully from their parents so that they could brainwash them, they could make them think, talk, and act like Babylonians. The goal is to make them loyal to Nebuchadnezzar and help him rule over the captive Jewish people. The book of Daniel is all about how Daniel and his friends were able to faithfully live for God even though they were in a pagan culture, far away from home and far away from parental authority and influence. Our goal this morning is to study all of chapter 3 and in the process can learn 3 principles to help us be a people of integrity, the kind of people that God wants and the kind of people our world so desperately needs. So if you are taking down notes, let me give you my outline. Point number 1, the pressure to bow to other gods is great. Point number 2, the price of integrity may be high. Point number 3, the protection for those who stand for God is sure. Let's now look at the first point with greater detail, okay? The pressure to bow to other gods is so great, okay? Pakibasa verses 1 to 7. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. Summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Listen, okay? Fundamentally speaking, at the very basic, integrity is an issue of worship. Okay? Integrity is an issue of worship. That means, if you don't know how to worship, it's hardly that you're a man of integrity, no? Integrity is an issue of worship. That's why Daniel chapter 3 can be a great help to all of us. We all faces that issue every day. Who am I going to worship? Who is going to be my God today? Si Yahweh ba or ako? Okay? Now, please remember, this event in chapter 3 is not recorded in the Bible as a bedtime story. Hindi yun ang original intention, okay? It is recorded here to help us understand the kind of pressure we are going to face. Yung echo pa kay off. Yung echo kay off. Okay? It's recorded here to help us understand the kind of pressure we are going to face and how to overcome it victoriously. The passage we just read says, King Nebuchadnezzar set up a large image of gold. It might be helpful to note in your Bible that the events in chapter 3 took place 15 to 20 years after the events in chapter 2. At the end of chapter 2, there's a gap, 15, 20 years. Then, itong chapter 3, okay? So there's a significant time lapse dito. If you were here last week, I summarized to you very, very quickly about Nebuchadnezzar's vision in chapter 2. He saw a vision, di ba? His vision is an image that had 4 parts: a head of gold, breasts and arms of silver, belly and thigh of bronze, legs and feet of iron mixed with clay. I also said last week that my conviction is that God intentionally let Nebuchadnezzar forget his dream, okay, to have an opportunity to raise Daniel even higher and to give God all the glory. So after this intentional divine amnesia, temporary, okay, God then revealed to Daniel Nebuchadnezzar's dream and its meaning. Daniel said, "You, O king, is the head of gold, because God had richly blessed you with wealth and power. And the rest, other parts of the body, okay, those are the subsequent kingdoms who would overthrow its preceding kingdom, and each one being of decreasing quality or value until God would send his son, cut without hands, the Lord Jesus Christ, to establish his kingdom on this earth forever," okay? We mentioned that last week in passing, okay? There's more. At the end of chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar made some sort of profession of faith, saying that everyone should worship Daniel's God. But like many professions of faith, it's not from the heart. Time proved that it was not genuine, hindi tunay. It's only lip service, okay? Only head knowledge, because 15, 20 years later in our passage this morning, chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar deliberately sets up a 90-foot image of himself overlaid with gold and commanding everyone to worship him. The entire image is gold. Hindi yung ulo lang. The entire image is gold. Now, don't think for a minute that it was solid gold, okay? Walang solid gold na ganyang kalaki. In ancient world, it was very common to make something out of wood and then cover it with gold plating. The image is huge. Gano'ng kalaki? It says 60 cubits high. That's 90 feet high. Gano'ng kalaki? 90 feet high. Almost 30 meters. And then it says 6 cubits wide. About 9 feet wide. Weird dimension for an image, no? Kasi it's not really an image. It's more like an obelisk. Alam mo yung obelisk? Don't think Statue of Liberty. Think Washington Monument. Okay? Why is this significant? Because in the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream, only the head is gold. So bakit niya pinag-gold plate lahat? Sabi ng Diyos, ikaw ito. Okay? The chests were made of silver, the belly, the thigh was made of bronze, legs was made of iron, and those different materials, different parts represent different kingdoms that will come after him. So I want you, do you see what Nebuchadnezzar is saying with this image? Sabi niya, it's all gold. It's all me. Ayan. The Babylonian Empire will never pass away. My kingdom, my dynasty, this is the only thing everybody should be concerned with. So there's a connection between the image he set up in chapter 3 and the image he dreamed in chapter 2. Kaya lang, pinablow up niya. Okay? Lahat puro gold. The golden image was Nebuchadnezzar's way of saying his dynasty, his empire will never end. Very arrogant statement, don't you think? Ang yabang, okay? Walang takot sa Diyos. Don't worry because God will have His way later on, okay? Verses 2 to 3, He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image. May ribbon cutting, okay? Ask them to come. So the satraps, prefects, governors, blah, blah, and all other provincial officials assembled for the ribbon cutting of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Try to picture it, okay, in your minds, lahat. In the huge plain of Dura in Babylon, may isang malaking plain. The king set up a 90-feet obelisk, shining in brilliant gold, very, very elegant. Lalo na kung may sun, okay, kumikinang yan, okay, kumikinang. Imagine Nebuchadnezzar standing at the patio of his palace, pointing at the image and saying, that's me, that's my kingdom, that's my accomplishment. And then at the end of verses 5 and 6, as soon as you hear the sound, okay, all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever does not fall will be thrown into the blazing fire. Everybody was there. Imagine, lahat. Your thousands of government officials nandoon. And then, no doubt, thousands of commoners nandoon. Kaya the plain of Dura, ang laki, very wide, okay? All gathered around for the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the great statue. And you have there also the whole orchestra with variety of instruments. And then a herald cries out, hear ye, everybody. When the music starts, naisip ko, when the music starts, di ba? Iba to. When the music starts, you better bow down to the image. If not, okay, you're gonna get thrown to the fiery furnace and you're gonna be burned immediately. Stop here, because I want you to think for a moment, okay? Did you notice something weird? Sa katapos lang, we just read. What is weird? Something weird. Kapag hindi mo nakita, siguro 50%. Okay? Hindi Kristiyano kasi hindi mo na-feel. Siguro. I'm not judgmental, okay? I'm just saying, dapat, as a Christian, if you experience that, dapat kita mo kagad, something is weird, something is wrong. Okay? How enormous the pressure was when everything na nandoon, everything, okay, was working together to get you to bow down to that image. Yung pressure, grabe. First of all, the image was impressive. Everybody can see it. Kahit saan ka, it's 90 feet. Secondly, the music and the media presentation was very impressive. Doesn't music have a way of drawing us in? I'm sure the tune is catchy, okay? Thirdly, the herald's voice. Dapat grandiose, di ba? Hindi pwede yung, hear ye, okay, bow down. Hindi po dapat yatsong, di ba? He has the attention of everybody. All of that was together working to get the people to bow down to that image. But probably the greatest factor in causing someone to feel pressured to bow down to that image was the simple fact that everybody else was doing it and all the leaders were doing it. Everybody who is somebody around you, the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, judges, magistrates, provincial officials, and probably your uncle, your auntie, o kakilala mo, that you respected, your idols, your teachers, your neighbors, your crush, they are all bowing down. Tapos ikaw nakatayo, you'll be pressured to even bow down, di ba? Lahat. I want you to take this away, okay, from the plains of Babylon, okay? I want you to transfer it here to Quezon, Babylonia, right here, right now, and see what an incredible picture this is of Satan. No? Spiritually speaking, anybody who intends to draw us away from God can represent Satan. That means in chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar represents Satan, and he is presenting an image before all of us and says, bow down to it. In chapter 3, while Nebuchadnezzar and the heralds shouting, bow down, behind them, Satan is clapping, tama, tama, bow down, tama. Yung tatlo, hindi naka-bow down, no? Satan is supporting Nebuchadnezzar, all-out support. Because that's the goal of Satan, no? This is who you should be. Bow down to this image. The world around us, the culture, the music, the media, the important people, the successful people, the actors, yung mga nasa Hollywood, okay? The cool people, they all present to us a message. This is who you should be. Bow down to it. And almost always, that image has nothing to do with God or with His Son, Jesus Christ. Wala. Just like Nebuchadnezzar demanded that everybody bow down, so Satan engineers an image to the world, for the world to bow down to. Sabi ni Satan, this is the image of manhood. This is the image of womanhood. This is the image of success. This is the image of happiness, image of being cool. Bow down to it. This is who you should be. So are we going to bow down to it, or are we going to resist? The world presents to us an image that we are supposed to bow down to. But, let me tell you something, okay? As followers of Jesus Christ, as His disciples, as people who have surrendered their lives to Jesus, if that's you this morning, I have a message for you. There's an image that God wants you to conform to, is the image of Jesus Christ Himself. Romans 8:29 says that God's people are predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son. God wants you, God wants me to be more and more like Jesus. He wants us to be conformed into His image. Not the image that Nebuchadnezzar of this world may set up, not the media, and the music and the culture and everything else they're pushing into us, okay? But the image of Jesus Christ Himself. That means, beloved, my goal every day is to become more like my Savior who died and saved me. Hindi peer pressure. My goal is to be like my idol, to be like my parents, okay? It's to be like Jesus Christ. I want to love more like Jesus loved. I want to be strong more like Jesus is strong. I want to be wise more like Jesus is wise. I want to be committed to God's truth more like Jesus is committed to God's truth. I want to live my life in sacrificial service more like the way Jesus served sacrificially. That's the image that you and I and every follower of Jesus Christ is to be conformed to. It's your way. How did Jesus talk? With compassion, with love. How did He serve? He removed His outer garment and He washed feet. That's the image that you and I and every follower of Jesus Christ is to conform to. Romans 12:2, alam mo to, okay? I want to read Romans 12:2, okay? Pero hindi from the NIV, hindi from the Greek, hindi from ESV, okay? I want to read it from J.B. Philip translation. Bihira, no? J.B. Philip translation. Listen to this. Don't let the world around you squeeze you into its own mold, but let God remake you so that your whole attitude of mind is changed. Isn't that beautiful? The world is trying to squeeze us into its mold. God says, resist that. Labanan mo. When my dad was younger, many years younger, he was impatient. During my high school, college years, he was easily angered, loves to shout, and the world revolves around him. He was so full of himself, difficult to love. Hindi pa siya Christian, okay? Difficult to love. So I hated him, and I said I will never be like him. You know what? Because I was with him day in and day out, somehow his words, thoughts, and actions squeezed me into his mold. I became exactly like him, very impatient, easily angered, very controlling. But praise God, he saved me, and he kept transforming me through his words, through the Holy Spirit, through my leaders, and through my wife, lately. With the help of the Holy Spirit, I resisted bowing down to his image. Instead, I am determined that I'm going to conform to the image of Jesus Christ. Here's the bottom line, beloved. If you live your life with that mentality, I must be transformed. I must not be forced to squeeze into whoever's image, okay? I want to be like Christ. Sabihin ko na sa'yo, there's a price to pay. Look at verse 6. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing fire. Mahirap paging Kristiyano. On top of all the culture that's trying to squeeze you into its mold, on top of all the media influences, no matter how persuasive these things combined are, on top of that, there's still the law and the power of the government pressuring us even more to bow down to the world's image. Si Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, lugin eh. Pagan na nga, may law pa sa government, if you don't bow down, you will be thrown into the furnace. To the government, to refuse to worship the world's image is always seen as a treason. See, unbelieving friends, the world, it's just seen as a religious thing. Hindi siya treason. Pero pag ang government na nagsabi, it's treason. Mahirap, okay? It's a heavy thing for us to consider because as Christians, we are mandated on one side to obey the government, but on the other side, it's also true, when the government demands idolatry, we should draw the line, we should choose side. Mahirap paging Kristiyano in this world because there is idolatry all about in the world. Kahit saan, okay? Saan sa sulok ng mundo. You are naive if you think the world is pro-God. This world is not pro-God. The things in this world is not pro-God. They're anti-God. This world is tainted by sin due to Adam's fall, and Satan now owns this world. And ever since the fall, Satan has been using everything in this world to pull us away from God or to slow us down, and then eventually away from God. For example, you walk into the mall, and what message that comes screaming out, you need this, oh, you need this, also this. You don't have to pay for it now. Buy now, pay later, we'll bill you later. How many families find themselves under extreme pressure because they have bowed and worshipped the God of self-fulfillment and immediate gratification? Then you go to work and ang daming klaseng possible idols to worship. So staggering. You may have a boss who wants you to worship your work. And because he does not have a family life, okay, so he worships work and he wants you to worship work as well. And there's that pressure to bow at the Almighty God of the praises of men, approval of men, fear of men. And there's always the temptation to bow down at the idol of greed. Because of greed, you're tempted sa workplace to be deceptive. You pad your numbers with additional zeros. You are tempted to lower one notch your product quality because the cost is now higher. You are tempted to use deceit, lies, flattery in your advertising, marketing just to get more sales. All of that because you're committed to worship the idol of greed and money. Mahirap maging Kristiyano dito sa mundo. In fact, you're very willing to lower your standard and use your beauty, charm, your body, sex just so you can get your promotion, your dream house, your dream lifestyle. Listen, if the government, or once the government comes along and says, you bow down to this image or you will pay. Once the government says you should agree with our cultural, social, sexual ethics, or you will be going to make you pay. Okay. Once the government says that it is a signal that we cannot stay neutral, we cannot please both. We have to choose between the two. Last week, sinabi ko malinaw, no earthly kings, no government deserve the obedience that is reserved only for the King of Kings. No earthly kings, no governments deserve the obedience that is only reserved for the King of Kings. Our loyalty, our commitment, obedience is first and foremost to God. That's why in a democracy such as ours, we're invited to have a voice. And let me tell you, wherever we can, we should use our voice to help our government, not to compel people to sin, to help our government, not to slander them. Si Daniel and his friends in Babylon, pagan country, they have no say. Wala silang voting rights. But in a democracy, you have a role. And you must use it wisely and biblically and unto the glory of God. No? As Christians, we do not put excessive hope in our government because the kingdom of God does not arrive in Air Force One. No? But we also don't abandon the government unless we are pressured to disobey God. No? Then and only then should we choose to obey God rather than the government. Kahit na no one erected a 90-foot idols in your workplace, in your home, in your community, sa condominium nyo, the pressure to bow down to other gods is so great, so great. If we are honest, we should be scared kasi we are sinful creatures who can be easily motivated by the fact that everyone else is doing it. We love to follow suit. Sometimes I think we are still high school students. Bakit high school students? Because we are so desperately love for the attention, affection, approval of the peers around us. That also means if we are not intentional, if we just follow suit, okay, if we are not purposeful, not biblically motivated, it's only a matter of time before we compromise. Every man or woman who wants to be a follower of Jesus Christ must come to the place where he is willing to say, I'm willing to stand against the crowd. I'm willing to push against the current. It does not matter to me if everybody is doing it. Everybody may bow down to that image, but I want to be different. I want to be different. Kaya gusto ko yung commercial na Cosmos dati, Sarsi, by Ryan Kiabyab, angat sa iba. Tandaan mo? Gusto ko yan, okay? And let me suggest that you are short-sighted, you're proud if you think, no, it will never happen to me. I will never compromise. I will never bow down to angels, to idols. No? You're proud and naive. Let me mention three very quick, okay? Three things that actually complicates the issue. Bakit even Christians, if not purposeful, if not intentional, okay, not conscious, we can be persuaded to worship idols. Bakit? The first one is existence of our adversary, the devil. All through the Bible, Satan's goal is to promote the worship of false gods. That's why he fell out of heaven himself, because he didn't want to worship the true God. Gusto niya, you worship me. He wanted to elevate himself above God. That's the approach he took with Adam and Eve. You don't have to listen to God's word, God's command. You can be your own God, stupid. Di ba? This was part of the temptation he used with Christ in the wilderness. Sabi niya, all these things I will give to you if you fall down and just worship me once. Siyempre, pag once, sa kanya na, di ba? If Satan used that method in tempting Christ, we are not exempted, okay? Listen to what Paul said, 2 Corinthians 11:3. I am afraid. Bakit siya afraid? I'm afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. Posible? Posible. Now, if you combine that verse to 1 Peter 5:8, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. That means Satan also has great success using that same method within the church. He has devoured many Christians using that method. So when we read about the pressure that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were under, we have to remember that's exactly the kind of pressure Satan places on God's children every day. Ephesians 6:12 says we are not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, against the spiritual force of evil in the heavenly realms, and we would be wise to understand the nature of that struggle. Second complicating factor is our own past. Every person in this world is born in sin. Every person in this world is born alienated from God. Yes, Christian tayo, but we're still living in this unredeemed flesh. Yes, saved tayo, forgiven, but the presence of sin nandyan pa rin. The power, wala na, we can overcome. But the presence of sin is still there until Jesus Christ comes back, no? So we're living in a body that is bent in doing what is not right. We're living in a body, unredeemed flesh, bent to prefer idols with greater freedom to sin rather than one true God with many do's and don'ts. No? So we bring into Christian life a propensity to worship false gods. Kaya mahirap. Third complicating factor is recorded in the book of Ezekiel chapter 14. Ezekiel chapter 14 gives a chilling explanation of what idol worship can look like. Okay? Pakibasa, sabi dun, some of the elders of Israel came to me and sat down in front of me. Then the word of the Lord came to me, Ezekiel, son of man, these men have set up idols in their hearts. Therefore speak to them and tell them this is what the sovereign Lord says. When any of the Israelites set up idols in their hearts and put a wicked stumbling block before the faces, then go to a prophet. I, the Lord, will answer them myself. Okay. What is idol worship, Ezekiel 14? Idol worship is first and foremost an issue of the heart. Something is wrong with your heart. Okay? Doon ang galing. Doon ang kumpisa. I also said in my opening statement that the issue of standing for God, okay, the issue of being a person of integrity, the issue of who or what we are going to worship is also an issue of the heart. It does not begin with the hands, it begins with the heart. That means very possible for you to walk into the doors of the church all dressed up with Bible in your hands, serving as song leaders, deacons, communion ushers, yet in your heart is still crammed full of idol. Posible yan. Hindi porke pumasok ka, wala kang idol. Because it's an issue of the heart and nobody can see through our hearts. We can always pretend. We can always parrot words, holy words. Kamsiatsu, Hotsaki. That also means the only reason Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego draw the line, walang takot and draw the line, was because their heart had drawn the line already. It starts with the heart. Yung paa niya, kayang hindi lumuhod kasi the heart already made the decision. They are sold out for Yahweh already. They have given all their hearts to Yahweh. Yahweh is ruling in their hearts. Yahweh owned their hearts already. You can't have two gods serving in your heart. Hindi pwede. The Bible says that either you will love one and hate the other, or you will be loyal to one and despise the other. So mali yung kanta, si Aida o si Lorna o si Faye. Hindi totoo yan. Hindi yan totoo. Okay? Hindi pwede. Hindi pwede. The Bible says that either you will love one and hate the other, or you will be loyal to one and despise the other. You can't have two. No? What happened to the rest? Verse 7 says, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold. As soon as the music played, pow, no resistance, no hesitation, kagad. Wala hesitation. These people are willing to give their hearts to the golden image. The second the music played, boom, not an ounce of resistance. That shows they have no one ruling in their hearts. The truth is, I cannot know that about you, and you can't know that about me. Kasi nga, we already said, we can go to church dressed like Christians, okay? Smell like Christian Dior, di ba? And yet full of idols in our hearts. Principles from Daniel chapter 3 about integrity. Point number 1, the pressure to bow to other gods is great kahit na Christian ka. Point number 2, the price of integrity may be high. Help me. Let's read verses 8 to 18. Who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound, I give you another chance. One more chance. One last chance. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown. Then what God will able to rescue you from my hand? As soon as they decide not to bow down, some astrologers or some Jews, okay, according to verse 8, came forward, denounced the three. In Aramaic, okay, it's not astrologers. It's some Chaldeans, okay? Some Chaldeans. Who are these some Chaldeans? Many believe that these are guys in the government of service who had been bypassed or passed over as Daniel and his three friends got promoted. Naiwan. Okay? These are guys that have been people above them in the corporate ladder, and they will do everything possible to drag you down. By the way, let me be clear that you don't find Daniel's name ever mentioned in this chapter 3, wala. Okay? That's because he's not physically around or present when these events took place. Nasaan siya? Probably he was away doing the king's business. Tanda mo, he's a governor. Okay? Anyways, we cannot say from verse 8 to 18, habang binasa mo, we cannot conclude that if you choose to be a person of integrity, if you stay faithful to your God, you will always have to pay this kind of price. Hindi, it's not explicitly stated. 100% kaagad. Okay? You will encounter problems if you're faithful. But God always discloses fully to His children what it means to follow Him. Okay? And the price for this kind of integrity, yung walang takot, kahit ako na lamang, okay? The price is very high. Not always kaagad, not 1:1, pero the price is always very, very high. Allow me to give to you 5 observations from verses 8 to 18, when Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego chose not to bow down to other gods. Several things happened. Firstly, notice the jealousy of other people. The Chaldeans could not stand the fact that these Jewish men were not worshiping the idol in verse 8. It angered them that they were standing out from the crowd. Special sila. I'm not saying that will be the universal response to a person of integrity. Hindi, okay? What I'm saying is that if you live like these 3 men, you will probably have some folks in your life who don't like it and they will do anything to harm you. Siguro isa, dalawa, or kung marami, posible. In fact, if you look closely, these 3 men did not shout out their refusal, okay? When everybody bowed down, they did not carry placards in the streets shouting, "Nuts to Nebuchadnezzar! Nuts to Nebuchadnezzar!" Walang ganyan, okay? They just stood there silent before God and before the king, quietly. Hula ko pa nga, nakabow down sila, no? Hindi yung nakatingin sa image. Just quietly standing there before God, before the image. Their attitude is this: Nebuchadnezzar, do as you please. That's between you and God. But we, no matter what, will not bow down to this image. They do not make a formal protest. Do not go around slandering Nebuchadnezzar. Dapat chapter 2, pinatay ka na eh. Okay, nabuhay ka pa eh. They just don't share in the sin of the idolatry. They're quiet. They don't make a fuss out of it, no. Secondly, notice also the anger, the rage of these 3 that these 3 men had to endure, no? Galit ang mga tao sa kanya. We normally brag that we have many friends, many followers, but we don't brag about having enemies. No one wants to have enemies. Wow, I have 100 enemies and 2 death threats every day. Walang ganyan, okay? Have you faced that this week because you would not worship their God? Because you wouldn't blindly follow suit? Thirdly, notice also the additional pressure in verse 15. Ito yung nakakatakot, verse 15. The most powerful man, Nebuchadnezzar, stops the band. Biglang walang sound. And asks, "Is it true?" Everybody's looking at you. All medias are focusing on you. Can you imagine the pressure? Kung yung supi mo, neighbor nagtanong, "Is it true?" Okay lang eh. Kung mayor, "Is it true?" Okay lang eh. Presidente, may mga bodyguard. Tapos may mga kutsilyo. You know Nebuchadnezzar can pronounce kill. Eh siya nagtanong, "Is it true?" Eh kapag si Grace, okay, hindi ako takot. Ipis nga, takot siya eh. Sinasabi, hindi ako takot sa kanya kahit malaki katawan niya. Pag may ipis, nasa table siya eh. Okay? Imagine the pressure. Just fall down and worship the image once, then it will be over. Just one bow. Ano ba naman yung one, just tilt your head. Tilt your head lang, di ba? Kunyari, nadapa ka lang, oh. Okay na. Just compromise once. Just pretend you didn't see it and you're okay. By the way, do you remember the disciple who failed to have resolved to stand for the truth? One disciple who failed to resolve to stand for truth. Si Peter, di ba? Peter, just before Jesus went to the cross, sabi niya, "I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'll be faithful to you till the very last. Even if everybody leave you, ako hindi. Hanggang kamatayan." Great talk. That was like him not bowing to the image. kaya lang, just a few hours later, a servant girl looked at Peter in the eye and said, "Is it true?" I don't know him. Who is Jesus? I'm not his disciples. You see, it's one thing to make a stand for the moment, but when you're questioned on it directly face to face by a powerful man, it's different, no? In chapter 3, it's not a servant girl asking, "Is it true?" It's Nebuchadnezzar who has the power to kill them, asking them. Yung mukha niya mapula, galit. "Is it true?" Again, imagine the pressure they face. It's all real. Tunay yan. Nebuchadnezzar is real. The anger is real. The Chaldeans are real. Of course, the furnace is also real. But let me tell you something. To Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, what is even more real to them at that moment was God Himself in heaven. In their hearts, they're always thinking of God in heaven. They have given their hearts to Yahweh in heaven. And He is more real than Nebuchadnezzar. You don't have to pretend that there's no pressure to bow down. There is. You just let the reality of God be bigger in your life than all other realities. Always focus. Minsan, hindi natin nakita ang Diyos. You know why? Ito yung problema. Yung Diyos sa likod. Ang laki ng problema natin. Yung Diyos maliit eh. Let's change the strategy. Put God before your problem. Put God before your enemy. And God becomes bigger. That is what God is challenging us to do. As a disciple of Jesus Christ, your loyalty to Him, your relationship with Him should be bigger than any of those other things. And that's why we need to keep a vital, real close relationship with Jesus Christ day by day, where He is real to us and real in our life. Kapag everyday hindi siya tunay, you don't experience Him. Pag dumating yung problema, too late. Too late. Pray until He becomes real to you. Read God's word as if the relationship becomes real, no? I love what Charles Spurgeon said about this. Sabi niya, "Do not judge the situation by the king's threat and by the heat of the burning fiery furnace, but by the everlasting God and the eternal life which awaits you. Do not let flute and harp fascinate you, but hearken to the music of the glorified. Men frown at you, but you can see God smiling on you, and so you are not moved." No? Galit yung mga tao. But you're conscious God is smiling at you. You become brave. You become brave. If you never sense God smiling at you, if you have no real relationship with God, then what power do you have to stand in the day you are challenged to compromise? Wala. You don't have any power, you don't have any assurance. God was real to Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. That is why they can make a stand. Fourthly, note the threats at the end of verse 15. If you don't do it, you will immediately be cast into the fire. Sa China, many are willing to die for Christ. Pag nahuli ka, okay, baril. Christ or die. Pag you say Christ, okay. Next, Christ or die. Wait, ha? Wait. Okay, Christ. Okay. Kaagad immediately. Pag sinabi siya, Christ or die. If you said Christ, sige, bilanggo ka for 5 years. Okay lang yung 5 years. 5 years may pagkain. 5 years, buhay ka pa, di ba? Yung immediately, yung pressure, ang lakas, no? Nandun yung katabi mo anak mo. Buhay, Christ, live, or die. Your son is with you. Immediate. Yung pressure, no? Anak, mauna ka. That word immediately scares all of us. Wala ng court proceedings. Walang appeal, walang innocent until proven guilty. The punishment is immediate. That means if you won't worship my gods by choice, then you will worship them by force. And fifthly, be ready that they will ridicule your God. You can hear the sarcasm at the end of verse 15. Sabi ni Nebuchadnezzar, what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? Notice, hindi niya sinabi, your God, Yahweh, can deliver you out of my hands. Hindi. He makes his argument against all gods, lahat. There is no God who can deliver you out of my hands. Nebuchadnezzar, kahit na pabalik ng God, wala akong pakialam sinong God, no God can save you from my hand. This shows you, this shows you what Nebuchadnezzar truly believes, no? He does not believe in the obelisk. He worships himself. What God can save you from my hands? He worships the King me. I don't care which idols you worship, whether it's God's word, whether it's a God the world sets up, or a God you set up, or the things in this world. As long as you reject God, He's not in your heart, then you're actually truly worshiping yourself, no? The King me. That's what Nebuchadnezzar did. Lumabas yung katotohanan. Kala natin yung image. Pero what God in this world can save you from me, from my wrath, from my anger? What's the message in all of this? Here's the message. These three men were paying a huge price for their faithfulness to God. And the key is here. They were very willing to pay the price. Very willing to pay the price. Whatever integrity in that situation cost, they were willing to pay the bill. I started my sermon with a quote from David Jeremiah. Let me give you the complete. Kanina pinutol ko eh. Let me give you the complete quotation. The world is crying out for men and women, boys and girls who have conviction of heart and who does not change their convictions on the basis of their circumstances. Circumstances. These three men knew what God wanted them to do, and they were not afraid of the circumstances, no, of the consequences. Question: why wouldn't these three men bow down to the image? What was so bad about it, di ba? Everybody is doing. They can say, "Well, everybody is doing it," di ba? They could say, "Well, I think God will understand, okay, the predicament we're in, or I will sacrifice my conviction for the greater good. I want to share the gospel to them. Pero pag patay na ako, who will share? So, bow down na lang, bow down, okay?" They can always say that. Bakit hindi? Bottom line is, these three men could not do that because it would have been a violation, a clear violation of the Word of God. No? That's why they said in verse 16, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this. We don't need to defend. They were not being disrespectful. The point was, their minds were made up already. They did not have to think, let me think about it 1 week. They don't have to think about it, they did not have to pray about it, did not have to get counsel from others. Bakit? Kasi malinaw na nakasulat sa Bible, thou shalt not have any other gods before me, period, end the story, no question, no if, no buts. So King Nebuchadnezzar, with all due respect, we are not bowing down to your image. We don't have to think. You don't have to give us a second chance. Whatever price comes with that, we are completely ready to pay the bill. That's why sabi ko, kanina, integrity is an issue of the heart, no? Your heart is not made up na I want to honor God's word. Walang mangyayari. I want to honor God. Walang mangyayari. You're not loyal, you're not committed to God. Walang mangyayari. Walang integrity na mangyayari sa buhay mo. If the conversation ended in verse 17, praise God. Di ba? But it ended in verse 18, and what they said in verse 18 is even more glorious than verse 17. It's a whole other dimension of trust in God, no? Even if He does not, O King, we want you to know, Your Majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Such a powerful statement. Ini-imagine ko, hindi sila ganun. And even if our God will not kill us, okay, we will not bow down. Nanginginig. Okay, hindi. Very bold. Walang takot, okay? Did they believe that God can save them? Yes. They know that God is powerful and can save them, but they would not presume to know God's will. They know as God, He works in a mysterious way, He works in a millions way. As God, God can do anything. As God, to worship Him is to put again your hands on Him. No complaint, not demanding, Lord, bahala ka, whatever your will is. They have the attitude that's also expressed in the book of Job, where Job said, though He slay me, yet will I trust Him. Beloved, as we look at Christianity today, I think we need an infusion of this kind of spirit, no? Bold spirit. Because what we see in so much of Christianity today is, God, I love you. God, I want to serve you. I will honor you as long as you do what I expect you to do. We need to keep our firm trust that God can work miracles and He's a miracle working God. Yes, tama. But if God does not perform miracle, if miracle does not come, we're still going to love Him, trust Him, and serve Him. Sometimes terminal diseases like cancer, accidents, dementia interrupts our life. I believe God is a healer. He can heal me, either by miracle or by medical procedures or combination of both. I believe that. But what if the healing does not come? Then I will still love Him and serve Him. That's the attitude God wants from us. Confident in His power, but never presuming to know His will. No? Confident, but hindi presumptuous. Friends, I have my own, ang dami kong dream sa buhay. College pa lang, ang dami kong dream. I'm going to be the best programmer. Okay? I can't tell you all my dreams, but I have so many dreams, so many desires. I pray that God fulfill the desires and dreams of my heart. But if He doesn't, I'm not going to turn my back on God, because He is not just there to be my servant and fulfill my desires. You know what He is? He is my God, and I serve Him no matter what. Their determination to serve and stand for God did not begin here in chapter 3. Tayo may crisis na, Lord, tulungan mo ko. Their determination began in the king's cafeteria in chapter 1. It's the obedience in the small things in chapter 1, okay? Eating vegetable, hindi yung mga meat nila. It's the obedience in the small thing that gives us the character to obey Him in big things. Many says, when the big challenges comes, I will obey God. Oh, too late, too late. You see, if you are not faithful in obeying the little things, you have no assurance, no confidence, no power to say, I will definitely obey Him in the big things of life now. You start small. My wife, Grace, challenged my 3 children last December. I'm not sure kung first time or may second time, third time na hindi ko alam. My wife said, since you are blessed to have worked, since God bless you in many ways, would you be kind and loving to give our missionary in Bangladesh money so they could have opportunity to enjoy Christmas with their family, eat together? Okay? Hindi na galing sa simbahan. From your own personal pocket money, no? Ariel, you have no work, but you have money in the bank. Okay? Would you also give? Let me tell you, no hesitation. No hesitation on their part. They give thousands. Do you want to know why they can give with joy No hesitation. Pinag-isipan ko to eh. You want to know why? Because from time to time, Nasal would come home bringing pastillas, crackers, potato chips, money. Kaya ako nagkagaot. Okay? From time to time, he would bring home these things. Okay? I said, saan galing to? Listen, saan galing to? An old lady trying to meet both ends by selling this. Naawa ko. Mahal, no? Oo, pero okay lang. Okay? Why okay? Because he saw the need. He grabbed that opportunity and showed God's love and compassion. He obeyed God in those little things, no? He obeyed God in hundreds. He can be trusted to obey God in thousands. Minsan kawawa. I know someone who asked his children, nakita na magtataho, ang nagbuwat matanda, bili ka, bumili. Dado, hindi ako kumakain ng taho. Ba't ba ako pinabili? Hindi ba nakita? Hirap na hirap sa buhat. Kawawa naman. Ano ba yung pera? Sap ko, di sap ko. Ano ba yun? Tulungan mo. You're faithful. You're obeying little things. You showed God's love, compassion. God can trust you to obey in big things. Si Kaiser, Grace told him to support the church regularly, and he would give Grace the money regularly. Ma, pang-offering. He's obedient in small things. Surely he has the power to be obedient in big things. Many of you here, whenever we don't have Sunday school teachers, are willing to obey and serve as teachers, assistants, like Ariel, like Denise, okay, Nancy Chi, okay, marami pa sa inyo. Who cares about Sunday school? Nobody cares. Nandito tayo eh. We don't know ano nangyayari sa kabila eh. God cares. God remembers. And because you're obedient in small things, you're willing to walk the second mile, willing to sacrifice, you can be sure that God can use you in bigger things like malay mo, deacons in the church. Diba? Because it's in the little things that we can make a stand for Jesus Christ that God builds within us the character and the courage to stand for greater things and bigger things. Do you have an opportunity this week to think those kind of thoughts, say those kind of words? Have you heard of a man known by the name Chaplain Kennedy? Have you heard of this alam ko, kilala niya si Charlie Chaplain. Charlie Chaplain. Charlie Chap. Oh, yun. During World War II, Chaplain Kennedy. Gulo po. Chaplain Kennedy was often placed in front lines sa battle. No? Always. He can die anytime. One day he wrote to his son. Sinabi niya, son, the first prayer I want you to learn to say for me, kasi it's only 1 year old, no? At 10-year-old, 10-year-old, okay? The first prayer I want you to learn to say for me is not, God, keep Daddy safe. I want you to pray, God, make Daddy brave. And if he has hard things to do, natakot siya, make him strong to do them. Sarap pakinggan, no? Tama. But that is not what touched the son's heart. Do you know what touched the son's heart? The next paragraph. Sabi niya, son, life and death don't matter. Tandaan mo yan. But right and wrong do. Dead daddy is still daddy. And I will still love you. But a dishonored daddy before God is something too awful for words. Remember, nothing matters nearly as much as doing what is right. If you can do what is right in the little things, sabi ko sa'yo, you're so used, God will use that to build your character to do what is right in the bigger things of life now. Show me a person who is not willing to stand out from the crowd because there's a price to pay, and I will tell you that he cannot stay faithful to the scripture. No? He has no integrity. Takot siya. Here's a long quotation from Martin Luther. Next week is Reformation Day. Okay? This is what Martin Luther, okay, says. Pakibasa, if I... My friend, there is a price to be paid for integrity. Are you willing to pay the bill? Probably some of you might say, Pastor, I know I could not have stood like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego kasi I don't have the kind of personal relationship with you, no? Hindi very close, hindi very real that would give me strength to take a stand. So hindi ko kaya. Well, why won't you trust Christ? Why won't you draw near to Christ? If hindi ka pa Christian, you may not understand everything, you may not know everything about Jesus Christ, but do you at least trust and believe that He died in your behalf because you are sinful, because there's nothing you can do to earn heaven, and He is sinless, and He can bring you into heaven? That point, at least, sine qua non, yung pinaka-basic. Do you understand that? If you say yes, then God is inviting you to put your trust in His Son and have a real relationship with God, no? The good news is that God sent His Son Jesus Christ to die in our place, making it possible for us to be reconciled to a holy God and to be in a position where we can begin living lives of integrity like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Some will say, Pastor, I have a personal relationship with Christ already, but the pressure to bow down to other gods is so great, the price so high, I find myself bowing down far too often. No? When things like that happen, instead of giving up, instead of saying, hindi ko kaya, it ought to give us greater understanding that it is only through Christ that we could live such life. It ought to drive us to Christ. Sabi Paul Washer, nagkamali ka nga eh. Don't just stand there. Run toward Christ. Alam mo, mali ka na. Ba't ka pa nakatayo? Hindi ka sincere. Sincere ka, you run toward Christ. You embrace Christ. Because alam mo, there's nothing in you that's good. Only Christ is good. Things like that ought to force us to look to the cross and be ready to crucify our sinful desires, mortify the lust and deeds of the flesh. We ought to take our crosses and follow. If we don't run to Christ, isa lang ibig sabihin, excuse lang yan. Excuse lang, ayaw mo. Kasi as a Christian, you were given the power over sin. You can say no to sin, pero ayaw mo. Point number one, the pressure to bow to other gods is great. Point number two, the price of integrity may be high. What happens to the person that refuses to bow down to false gods? Daniel chapter 3, 19 to 20, pakibasa. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king's command was so urgent and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And these three men firmly died. Three men firmly tied. The third principle we find in this text is this: the protection for those who stand for God is sure. Sabi sa verse 19, in fury, galit na galit, Nebuchadnezzar's attitude toward them changed. Yung una, is it true? Huh? Ngayon, hit the furnace 7 times more! Galit na galit. No. Whenever I study the Bible, I always ask why, no? Malikot yung mind ko, okay? When I read this, sabi ko, why hit it up 7 times more that would only mean less suffering for them because they would immediately die. Patay. Di ba? Kapag ako si King Nebuchadnezzar, cool down the fire, let them roast. Di ba? Tapos play the music. Give me all in my lamp to keep me burning, burning, burning. kung ako yun pero hindi. Verse 20 says, he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie them up and throw. Tatakas ba sila? Strongest army, that's the SEAL team ni Nebuchadnezzar, yung mga elite. Because the furnace was so heat up, flames killed immediately the soldiers of the king. These are the SEAL team of Nebuchadnezzar. Upon reaching the door, the soldiers were only able to throw the men inside, but they were not able to save themselves. No? The three men fell into the furnace, firmly tied. Verses 24-25, King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement, and pagtapon, a few seconds after, he leaped tumalon kagad, okay? And asked his advisors, weren't there three men that we tied up and threw into the fire? Certainly, Your Majesty. Look, I see four men. Siguro, I see four men. Look, I see four men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of God. King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. Nagulat. Okay? We don't know how this furnace was constructed. We don't know how he could look into the furnace, okay? Nakita niya sa loob, but he could, okay? If for 1 second may isang nakatayo, okay lang. If for 2 seconds, okay, kasi 7 times more, heated, di ba? Sobrang init. Yung soldier nga, hindi pa nakalapit eh. Patay na eh. So kapag may 3 seconds, may tao naglalakad pa, he would be astonished. But he did not see 1, 2, or 3. He saw 3 alive and 1 extra man, and they were not bound. They were walking around in the fire unharmed. Siyempre, that's alarming, no? Ting, 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 ting. Tatayo balahibo mo, di ba? Now, I want you to listen to me. There's an ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew scripture called Septuagint. Septuagint, they add some interpretations. Sa tingin niya, yun ang ibig sabihin. Okay? Septuagint is not inspired. In the Septuagint version of Daniel chapter 3, verse 24, it says, Nebuchadnezzar's attention was caught. Nung pagtapon, he was caught kaagad, okay, when he heard the men singing praises to God in the furnace. Tandaan mo, nakatali Pagtapon, lalakad kaagad. So hot, it burned the rope. They were walking, and they were singing praise to God. This is not inspired, okay? I'm not saying this is the interpretation. But isn't that a provocative thought? Isn't that a provocative thought? What perplexed him is the sound of praise and worship inside the furnace, no? This is out of the ordinary, okay? It would be easy to read this and think this is obviously a fairy tale. Things like this don't happen. Walang ganyan. Soldier nga namatay sila. Ooh. Di ba? This is out of the ordinary. People don't survive after being cast into the fire, heated 7 more times, okay? I get that. And certainly, 4 people don't just mysteriously appear in the midst. This is totally off the grid. But, listen, if you say this is impossible, this is just a made-up story, then let me tell you as gently as possible why you are wrong, and I'm going to give you a biblical basis of my objection. Here is my one biblical basis of my objection. Single verse, one verse, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you believe that, you could believe this. If you don't believe that, you probably will not believe any of this or any of the rest of the book, no? If you believe there's a God enthroned in heaven, mighty enough to create heaven and earth, then everything you see or can see is created by God, then there's no problem believing that the same God who created the sun and the stars as mighty furnaces in the earth chose to suspend those properties for a moment so that these men could survive and walk around in the midst. No? Kung may Diyos, kayang-kayang gawin yung ginawa niya. If you don't believe in God, you don't believe that God created the heavens and the earth, then it is a big problem. Saan ang galing yung apat? May multarita, di ba? Because you don't believe in God. If you say, I believe in, I'm a scientific person, no? I believe in science, but science so far has not proven that God exists. You're right. Because God is supra-science. He is above science. He is not limited by science. He can't be proved by science. Science, it should be put in a test tube, okay? Observe again. Then they can make the observation by science. No? Pero how can you put God in a test tube? How can you test a spirit using existentialism? Hindi kaya yan, okay? He is above science. He is not limited by science. There is a God who is above science and the scientists, and this God could at times and at certain places suspend the natural laws for a special time and a special purpose. And then in chapter 3 is that special time and special purpose. If it's true that they sang praise and worship, assuming totoo, okay, kaya nagulat siya kagad eh. If it's true, do you know who I'm reminded of? Paul and Silas singing in the Philippian jail, di ba? Paul and Silas singing in Philippian jail, Book of Philippians. I've got the joy down in my heart. Where? Down in, di ba? Philippians. Perhaps that's why Nebuchadnezzar was so astonished. He said, I see 4 men, and the 4th one looks like the Son of God. Nebuchadnezzar himself tells us the identity of the 4th man. How many went into the furnace? 3. How many were walking? 4. 3 plus 4? Where did the 4th man come from? Sabi ni Nebuchadnezzar, he looks like Son of God to me. It's a remarkable thing that Jesus was literally with them in the worst of their experience and in the fire. This should not surprise us, Jesus in their midst. Okay sa atin to. I mean, we understand that Jesus Christ did not begin His existence as a baby in Bethlehem. Alam natin Jesus Christ is the eternal God who had an existence before His incarnation in Bethlehem. Nandiyan na siya. And at certain times, certain places in the Hebrew Bible, it pleased Him to manifest Himself to appear in some kind of physical form. We see this in many places in the Old Testament, and this is one of them, Daniel chapter 3. Now, when I think all about that, okay, think about that. There's one thing I want us to remember. It's very, very important. God can deliver us from a trial just like He delivered this man. He can. But sometimes God's will is not to deliver us from the trial, but to give us strength to endure in the trial. There are some people who are persecuted and may literally or figuratively thrown into the fiery furnace. I don't want to sugarcoat that. Talagang patay sila, they burn to the glory of God. But in Daniel chapter 3, listen, okay? In Daniel chapter 3, it fits God's design. It perfectly fits God's purpose. The Son of God was there walking in their midst. Why do I think it's so fitting, so beautiful? Because one simple view of the 4th man, the King Me was dethroned. One look, the King Me was dethroned. Nebuchadnezzar immediately realized he had a rude awakening that someone far greater, far powerful, far worthy than King Me is in the midst of the furnace. Hindi siya ordinary. Son of God to me. Sabi niya. In verse 26, he said, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. In verse 28, he gave a doxology and decree. Di ba? Sabi niya, then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him, defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship. Okay? Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego be cut into pieces, their houses be turned into piles, okay, of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. Earlier, sabi niya, what God could save you from me? Now all that changed. Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, who sent his angel, rescued his servants from me. He even called them servants of the Most High God, most higher than me. UCCC Church, it would be an honor and my great joy. Kahit na I spent sleepless night preparing for this sermon, if God could use this sermon to dethrone the King me in your life now. Maybe you're trusting too much in yourself. I pray that this sermon will dethrone that King me. I know you're loving. I know you're funny. You're hardworking. You're generous. You help people. Everybody loves. I know that. But you are a terrible God of your own life. You're a terrible God. You need a better God. You need a better God. Did Nebuchadnezzar have a change of heart and believe in God? Not yet. In chapter 4, God saved him. God transformed him. But not in chapter 3, not in chapter 2, not in chapter 1. He did not say, praise be to my God. No, sabi niya, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. While his trust in God is not yet complete, we can see his understanding of God keeps growing and growing and growing. No? Firstly, he knows that Yahweh is the God of Israel, covenant God of Israel. Secondly, he knows that Yahweh is the God who sends help. Thirdly, he knows that Yahweh sent his angel and rescued his servants. It means he's a powerful God worthy of trust. Fourthly, he knows with God's help, men are able to defy the king's command. He sees that as Yahweh is worthy of total surrender. Bakit? If God can frustrate all your rebellion against him, what's the conclusion? You should surrender to him. Tama? Kaya niya eh. Finally, he said that people should not serve or worship any God except the God of Israel, meaning he knew that God demands a total and exclusive allegiance. Nakita mo ba? Nebuchadnezzar very quickly went from knowing nothing about this God to knowing a lot about this God, no? From chapter 2 to chapter 3. When I say that, I don't mean that Nebuchadnezzar is so wise, ang galing-galing niya, he made the conclusion, he made the connection. No. Okay? God had already planned to save him as early as chapter 1. No? But the time has not yet come. Then we move to chapter 2. Time has not yet come. Then we move to chapter 3. God is slowly opening his eyes. God is slowly, showing him that someone is higher than him. He came to know God more and more because God had planned to save him in chapter 4. This tells us that you may know a lot about God and not know God for yourself. Not know God for yourself. You can learn so much about God by coming to church. Hopefully you learn so much about God through the songs, the testimony, the prayers, the sermons. But that does not translate to knowing him personally. Here's the key. To know God personally involves an element of trust and surrender. always an element of trust and surrender. For you to truly know God personally, you have to trust Him and you have to surrender to Him. You can learn about Him without trust and surrender, but you cannot know Him personally without trust and surrender. A few more words and I will end. We don't bow down to the image that the world poses upon us. We bow down to no other than Jesus Christ alone. We love Jesus Christ with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Bakit? Because a character of integrity is a matter of the heart first. I love verse 30. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego in the province of Babylon. Di ba sinabi ko sa'yo, all this mess was the result of certain ambitious officials who didn't like the way these three men were getting promoted and they tried to pull them down? What happened? God took care of their promotion just fine. Di ba? By the way, isn't it a huge principle for us? Honor God in your business and your life, and He will take care of you in the ladder of your career success. Hindi ko sinabi, okay? Honor God in your business, and He will take care of you. Hindi ko sinabi yan. Ang sabi ko, honor God in your business and in your life, and He will take care of you in the ladder of your career success. That means, if you only claim you honor God in your business, but others cannot see that, and you are successful, that's not from God. Maniwala, that's not from God. Kano galing yan? Kano galing success? From Satan. Satan used the world. Satan, mautak yan eh. He never lends without interest. Tandaan mo yan. He never gives without interest. Matakot ka. It's not from God. Kaya galing yan. Everything that is not from God will one day backfire. Meaning it will give you more problem. It will create more problem. Like Abraham in Egypt. Everything he earns by deception and lies backfired, resulted to more headaches and problems. Yung mga sheep, servants, nag-away. Yung maid servant, si Hagar, nagka-problema. Everything that's not from God will backfire. What did Jesus say about success? Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. Dapat yung life mo may righteousness. People can see that you're doing right for the Lord, and all these things shall be added to you. Beloved, may God raise up among you a brand new generation of followers of Jesus Christ that are steadfast in their courage and say, let them do what they do. But as for us, we'll follow Jesus no matter what. Okay? Sorry again to take your time. Okay? I think next week hindi na ako, okay? Hindi na 30 pages, okay? Let's pray. Father, speak to all our hearts this morning, and may we set aside the gods of this world and the emptiness in this world and worship you. No matter what Nebuchadnezzars there are in our lives, may we never bow. But may we, like those three young Hebrew boys, take our stand no matter what the cost may be. Give us the kind of character that we see manifest in these three young boys. Help us to live an uncompromising life and be a man of integrity. In Jesus' name, amen.